Um, so yeah, I'll get right to it. We've been asked to lead with a problem that keeps us up at night. It probably takes a special type of person, maybe the data nerd to which Don alluded, to be kept up at night by social science measurement problems. But in any event, here goes. I'd like to focus today on a seemingly pretty simple problem, as Karthik alluded to. We don't have a satisfactory, or at least fully satisfactory, set of tools for discovering what's happening on the ground among people with no power and no voice, people who don't, by virtue of power differentials, don't have a megaphone that's permanently strapped to their face. And as I see it, one of social science's core failures is that although we're in the midst of a world that generates one crisis after another, we don't have the tools needed to discover those crises in advance, to provide the advance warning we need. And the classic example of this problem is of course the opioid crisis. It was in play long before it was widely appreciated for the crisis it was, and that's a social science failure. So why you might say, why do our tools fail us? The root cause, I would argue, is that they amplify the voices and sensibilities of the powerful while leaving others largely voiceless. So you might ask, why hasn't this measurement problem been taken on? And I think the answer to that question is we've taken our eyes off the ball and we let this happen because the social science field mainly cares about building nomothetic methods for causal inference, survey experiments, quasi-experiments, RCTs, and so forth. And I love all that. Very important. But because of this relentless concern with causes, we've backgrounded what's arguably the equally important idiographic mission, the mission of understanding how our single world we live in, the only one we have, how that single world is developing and evolving. And the upshot is that old-fashioned methods, ones that have long amplified the voices of the powerful, remain our only available ones. So to illustrate this point, I want to take a closer look at our existing measurement infrastructure. So the go-to resources for monitoring and discovery are, of course, surveys and administrative data. And the key problem with both is that you can't discover what needs to be discovered if you don't know what questions to ask. And the people deciding what's to be asked are elite social scientists typically and policymakers who for the most part are members of the 1% or nearly so and have 1% sensibilities. The further problem is that even if the right questions are asked, and of course sometimes they are, even if they are asked, the survey is a fundamentally low-dimensional tool that reduces people to a small vector of quantitative scores of very thin characterization. So what about social media? And I'll just put it this way. Let's suppose an alien wanting to understand what humans are all about happened to bump Twitter. The alien would take a look and would soon conclude that humans are one giant population of humble braggers. But of course, we all know that we're not intrinsically humble braggers. It's just that this medium, this particular medium, is fine-tuned to milk every possible humble brag out of us. And this is all to just make the obvious point. Method effects are profound in that domain. And it's an obvious point, but important because the science of social media is often represented as the answer, as more than simply the study of social media and what happens within that particular environment. So let's turn finally to qualitative studies, long the method of choice for purposes of discovery. I'm a huge fan of qualitative methods. No one can deny how influential they've been, but we have to be honest that given that qualitative studies are almost always based on very small, unrepresentative, and proprietary samples, we just don't know whether the results are to be trusted. The typical qualitative journalist, for example, begins with a story, a hunch, a story they've decided to tell, and then interviews as many people as are needed until they find enough people to tell the story they've decided to tell. That's not science. That's not a method for discovery. That's an existence proof. And again, don't get me wrong, I'm an avid consumer. It's immensely important to have this type of qualitative journalism, but we may well want to consider the possibility that another method is also needed. Okay. So what needs to happen? What I would argue is we need to develop a new form that combines the representativeness and transparency of quantitative research with the immersive richness of qualitative research. It's not an argument for mixed methods. It's high time to move beyond that standard mantra for mixed methods. Again, big fan, but the core of that argument is that two deeply flawed methods, when carried out in conjunction with one another, will somehow magically cancel out those respective flaws. So here's the alternative idea. Instead of believing in that magic, that canceling out magic, let's try to fix the flaws. Let's target them directly and repair them and build a new complementary method. We need everything that we currently have. We need it desperately, but maybe it's time to innovate a bit on the matter of dealing with these flaws that I've cited here. So the good news is there is an ongoing experiment with just this hybrid form. It's called the American Voices Project, and it's based on immersive conversations with a representative sample of Americans, the objective being to learn how they're faring and what they're thinking, doing, and feeling. It's based on semi-structured, long-form conversations with the prompts fine-tuned to allow for discovery, to follow up on what's being revealed, and to bring out genuine, honest conversation. It's not unlike talk therapy. It's often cathartic, almost always revealing. If you listen to one of these interviews, it becomes clear just how thin our surveys are. It's based on a representative sample, and it's delivered by intensively trained students who are transformed, in many cases, utterly transformed in some cases, by the experience of coming into contact with worlds that are very different than their own. The data are then transcribed, de-identified, and made available to qualified researchers on secure servers. So we're still early in the experiment, but we've seen some payoff so far. Let me just talk a bit about that. As the crisis coursed through the US, teams of researchers completed real-time crisis reports, the purpose of which was in part a test of concept, an assessment of whether immersive interviews of this sort could uncover features of the crisis that conventional surveys and administrative data missed. So the first set of crisis reports have uncovered new types of coping, pockets of deprivation that the safety net wasn't adequately addressing, even the expanded one, mental health problems that hadn't been well appreciated, the heavy toll of the noxious contracts that we were asking workers to engage in, a new racial divide in discourse, and much more. In the research based on the forthcoming open call, we'll be developing new methods for monitoring attitudes and sentiments holistically, not just surgically extracting them by asking about them, but a holistic assessment. New measures of poverty based on everyday experiences, new predictive models of poverty, of intolerance, and more based on rich descriptions of current and past situations. And we'll be putting some of the key findings that have come out of past qualitative research to test with a large representative sample.